My name is Hermelinda Zamarripa, and I am from Austin. I grew up in East Austin, and I have a large extended family here in Austin.
Well, it is nice to meet you.
Thank you. Same here, Ania. I come from a very large family. Here, my parents wanted a small family, but they ended up with 14 kids. And probably would have had more, but my father died when he was very young. And in this photograph, we have most of us here. There are two of them missing, but here we are, most with my mom. And then of course my father isn't there because he died in 1964. Well, this is Mom in the red dress. And here she is again. Her name is, or was, Josefina, Josephine, and she was called Fina. She liked to be called Fina. And here she is with our dog at that time. We always had animals. Barely had enough food, but we always had animals there in the house. So Josefina, and here's my dad, Guillermo Zamarripa. So Josefina Moreno was her maiden name. And here is their wedding photograph. When they were young, my mother was so tiny. And she actually wasn't that big when she left us, but here's a picture, their wedding photograph.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So who were your grandparents?
Well, my grandmother was Salome Limon. I'm related to the very large Limon clan. We're several thousand people here. They get together during the Texas OU football game. They have a big family reunion, and there are just so many. I mean, you could date somebody and not know that they were your cousin. You know, it's a gigantic family. Her husband was Ignacio Moreno. That's his name. I had to see it on the tombstone because I couldn't remember. Ignacio Moreno was her husband. Mm-hmm. I wish I knew more about my grandfather. I do know that he was a very honorable and hardworking man, and that he could read both in English and Spanish, because he would read to my grandmother, my mother's mother, at night. He would read. And they used to live right by downtown. The Mexican American community was in West Austin. They used to live off of 6th Street and Congress for several years. But then the church, they moved. They started putting utilities in East Austin. Well, the families followed the Catholic Church, and so then they moved. But they lived in West Austin. My mother lived by on Red River, down the street from the police station. So that's where the Mexican American community was located, right around there, by Republic Square.
So who were your aunts, uncles, and cousins?
Well, mainly I know them from my mother's side, because on my father's side, they were still in Mexico, or they were scattered. They lived in Monterrey. And the ones that I heard about had passed. But so here on my maternal side, well, my mother was the oldest. And then Pete. It was Pete. Where is Pete? Here we go, Pete. So Mom and then Pete, okay? And then Ignacio, named after his dad, Ignacio. And they had several children, I think, that died, but they did not belong to him. So he died when he was very young, Ignacio Moreno. He was in his 30s, either 31 or 33. He died. And so my grandmother remarried. I mean, she was a stay-at-home mom. She had kids to raise, and so it was hard for her. She started working at a restaurant, and there she met Juan Trevino. And through that relationship, they had several kids. And some of those, I think 2 of them, they had 2 little girls that died separately. And then, but the ones that lived were my Uncle John Trevino and my Aunt Dora. My Aunt Dora is the only one, Dora Ortiz, Trevino Ortiz, is the only one that's alive. My Uncle John Trevino passed about 5 years ago. So everybody pretty much is gone except my Aunt Dora. The Zamarripas are from Mexico. And so when they died or they grew older, they used to go often to Monterrey. My aunt and my uncle, they used to go often to Monterrey. And so then we knew about the family. I mean, we didn't know them personally. We were kids and really didn't go. But, we heard the conversation. So that was it.
How far back can your family's genealogy go?
At least 5 generations. And we've been here 100 plus years.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews?
I do. Well, with all these kids right here, we have to have some, but none of us have a big family. And actually, there's some of us that don't have any kids at all because it was very difficult to grow up because if you were one of the oldest, for instance, I was number 5, I was always taking care of kids. So I was like a mom. I had mom responsibilities of changing diapers and feeding children and bathing them, making sure they didn't run out into the street, stuff like that. So we really don't have many kids. At the most, three or so.
So if you can remember, where is your family from?
My mother was born in East Travis County. My dad was born in Carrollton, Missouri. So they had immigrated. His father, also Guillermo, they had immigrated from Mexico. And here's his older brother, my Tío Roy, who's no longer with us. They immigrated. And I think they came by train. The Mexican Revolution was on, and it was awful. My uncle told my sister that they were really scared that they had seen men lined up and shot to death. And so they just escaped. And so they ended up, their father, Guillermo, was already in Missouri working in the railroads. And so they joined him. His wife and other children joined him up there. And they had been living a while. My father was just an infant when their father died on the railroad, working out there. I don't have all the details on that, but what I do know is that my grandfather, Guillermo Zamarripa, was coming home with 2 other men, and they had the little groceries in a knapsack. It's like a burlap sack. That's what they would put the groceries in. And they were crossing the rail yard, and the train ran over them. All 3 of them died. And so I've always been bewildered. And it's like, how can you die in a situation? In your work, you should know about trains, when they come, where they go, what time, more or less. And yet, you're run over by the train. Even if you are sick or so, or maybe even intoxicated, you would know not to venture beyond through certain tracks. So that's how he died. And so that's all I know about my grandfather, my dad's dad. And so then shortly after that, my grandmother brought the children, Roy and my dad, and they lived in South Texas, south of San Antonio. Ventres, I think that's it. And when my dad was 5, his mother died. And so my uncle, who must have been my Tío Roy, right here, my uncle Rosendo, and his wife, Rosa Zamarripa, they were already married. They came and they collected the children. There were like 5 of them, and they raised them as their own. So I've always seen them as grandparents, although I called them Tío y Tía, but that's to me, they were my grandparents because my mother's mother was sick. She was in an accident, a horrific accident, and had a lot of trauma to the brain, so she was never the same. And so, I mean, she would hallucinate and talk to herself. So anyway, those are the grandparents.
So where did you go to school?
Here in Austin, in East Austin. So we grew up in East Austin on Tillery Street, and so I attended public school, Brook Elementary, which was a block away, and then it's now an administrative building, but it was called Allen Junior High. Back then it was not called middle school, it was called junior high. And so I attended Allen, and then from there I went to Johnston. It was Eastside Memorial, but we knew it as Johnston High School. It was named after a Confederate. And so, yes, so that's why they changed the name to Eastside Memorial. So I went there a couple of years, and then I transferred to Austin High, which was where ACC Rio Grande is, the campus. That used to be Austin High. So I transferred to Austin High, and I graduated from there, and I really didn't know anybody. So everybody that I knew I had grown up with, and they were at Johnston. So if there's a reunion, high school reunion, I'll go to those. I've never been invited to the ones at Austin High, and it was different times. It was sometimes visible and sometimes kind of subtle. So it was kind of that.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. So what would you like to share about your childhood, adolescence, and adulthood?
I grew up really poor. We were so many. And my daddy was a sole worker, a breadwinner, and he barely made minimum wage. He worked at a carpenter paper company, and we didn't live too far from there. So he was a stock clerk. He unloaded trucks, and so he got a minimum wage. Rarely do we have fruit and vegetables to eat just because we couldn't afford them, or milk, cheese maybe a gallon. If we had ice cream, we'd have Melorine. I don't know if they make Melorine now. Is it really cheap ice cream? Anyway, so I grew up on beans, rice, and tortillas, fideo maybe. That was it, which, is yummy, but you need a lot more than just that, to grow. So I remember not having, being hungry, especially because Mrs. Baird's Bakery was down the street from us. So they'd start baking that hot bread when I'm getting ready to go to bed. And so we'd have those windows open and we'd smell the bread baking. Oh my God, that make me hungry. So I'm really, really bad with carbs. I love them. But so then there was a tremendous amount of responsibility growing up because there was just so many kids and a lot of work to be done, and mom needed help. So my mother was pretty much forced out of school. She loved school, and both of them, my father had a third grade education, and so they were believed in education. But it was a different time then, and so they were both forced out. My father, he had to work, but my mom, she also had to. But it was uglier with her. My father wasn't there to experience it, but they were really ugly with mom. I mean, she was actually socked. I mean, punch hard when she was punch hard like that when she was in school because she spoke Spanish. Now, when I was in school, I graduated in 1970. We could not speak Spanish. I remember being hit in the arm when I was in first grade by my first grade teacher, Mrs. Square. She did, we were waiting in line for the bell to ring, and she just swatted me. I guess just wiggling around or speaking Spanish or something. She was, they didn't allow that. It was difficult. So didn't want us to speak any Spanish, yet we had to take 2 years of Spanish in order to graduate from high school, right? You need Spanish to graduate. And so there we were, in class twiddling our thumbs because we need Spanish and it was so easy for us. But then the other kids that didn't grow up speaking two languages didn't understand it, and they struggle because it's easier to learn when you're younger. And so the teachers were very frustrated with us. So they didn't particularly like us when we were young, and they were frustrated with us and didn't appreciate our extra skills when we were older. So anyhow, but I always worked. We used to work in the fields. So now it's a good thing. I mean, people have a lot of giveaways to get ready for back to school. I don't know if you've ever really thought about how expensive it is to go back to school. Backpacks, some kids get backpacks every year, but so we didn't have backpacks then. You just carried everything in your arm. But I mean, just think of shoes, clothing, just school supplies for all those kids. So there's no way that my father, who barely had a minimum wage job as a stock clerk, was going to be able to supply all of that all at once for us. So we got one pair of shoes, and the cheap kind, and that had to last us all year long. So in the summer, I ran around barefooted. I could run in rocks and not feel them. That's how callous my feet were. So yeah, it was just a very difficult time, and not very much sympathy or services. I mean, there were some. My parents were very proud. And I think all of that has paid off in that they wanted us to study. They wanted us to graduate. Like, their highest aspiration for us was to graduate from high school. Like, that was a big deal for them. We excel, most of us excel way beyond that. My brother, he ended up going to UT, so when it was time for me to graduate, I thought, well, I guess that's where you go to next, Is that elementary, junior high, high school, UT, I just this is a continuation. I mean, that's how much attention we were paid when we were growing up. So that's where we went. Most of us, tuition was cheap, and we didn't have to pay room and board. I mean, we barely had bus money to get there. So remember when I said earlier that one of my mother had a set of twins, and one of them died when she was a toddler? So Kathy died. And so when we were at the funeral home, at that time, everybody went to Mission Funeral Home it was East First, now called Cesar Chavez. I mean, that was where all the Mexican-American families went to. It's Mission Funeral Home. The Villaseñor family owned it. So we were there for a viewing of Kathy there. And my oldest brother, Lupe, this one, which one is he? Where is that ugly guy? He's somewhere around here. Well, there he is, right there next to Mom. Right here. He had just graduated from high school, and so they were having the ceremonies at the auditorium. The auditorium is now the Long Center. That's where all the graduation ceremonies were there. And so my mom told Dad, Willie, because they didn't know how to say Guillermo at work, so they called him William or Willie. And so we would say Willie, give it the Spanish tongue to it. And she says, Willie, you go see Lupe graduate. I'll stay here with the baby. And so my dad went. That was at the end of May, to go see my oldest brother cross the stage, because that was just like a great big deal for people that had minimal education, that knew what it was like to suffer, that knew that the only way to get beyond those terrible economic and racial barriers was to educate yourself. And so here he is, living their dreams. I mean, this was their dream. So my father got to see my oldest brother graduate from high school. It may not be a big deal now, but it was a great big deal then, big. So he went to go see him graduate, 6 months later, my father died. So that was the only child that he got to see graduate, to cross the stage. My mom got to see the rest of us. She saw me graduate at UT also, so it was a big deal for them to have come from nothing to work real hard. For us, I said that it was so expensive to go back to school, we worked in the fields, picking cotton or hoeing cotton. My father would drive my mother and all of us to West Texas, to La Mesa, Texas, and they kept in touch with my grandmother, his Ignacio Moreno, who's buried here. They kept in touch with his mother, so we would go and stay with the Morenos in La Mesa, Texas, just sleep on the floor and get up and get in a truck early in the morning and go, pick cotton or hoe cotton. So, except for me, I couldn't do it because I almost died there of heat stroke. I still do. I can't handle the heat very well, but it was a hardship for our family. So we really didn't grow up with any niceties or anything like that. Everything that we had to earn. It was never given to us, and that was instilled on us that you had to work very, very hard to make things happen. And consequently, we had such an excellent role model. My mother was an excellent role model in that she stayed home, she worked. She lost her hand in, I don't know if you can see this, the fingers from her hand are missing. But when she left school in the 8th grade, she ended up working at a laundromat. And so the machine was malfunctioning when she was putting in some sheets through there, and her hand got stuck and it took it in there. They could not stop it. And so her fingers were sliced. So on her right hand, her good hand. And so she had to learn to do everything with her left hand. And she had beautiful penmanship, my mom did. Yeah, that was pretty incredible that she was able to do all of that and to keep our family together, because she was 36 when my dad died. He was 44. And all these kids, what are you gonna do? I mean, I would have been tempted to run away, but she was a very strong person, very strong, and she hung in there, and she stayed with us till, we were all out of school. And then, when the little ones were in school, the little ones, I mean, they're not so little now, but back then when they were in school, then she had time to go look for a job because she knew that she needed money. And it was Social Security that kept us afloat. She got $300 a month, and that's what we lived on. But she, my mother was very smart. When she lost her fingers in the accident, she bought a house in South Austin that because she wanted my grandmother to have stable housing. They rented, and it was her second husband was more into satisfying his needs and not bringing the check home. And so sometimes they didn't have anything to eat. And so my mother had lived part of that before she married my father. She was very young when she married, like 14. But she knew what that was like. So what she did with that money is that she bought my grandmother a house. And and that I even lived in that little house on South 2nd when I was in school. I used to pay her $90 a month because it's in central South Austin. It was very expensive property with very expensive taxes. And so, anyway, she bought that house, and she provided housing for her mother, and then the two kids, Aunt Dora and Uncle John. I have to say that my mother, when my grandmother was in an accident, she was working, but she was in a traffic accident when they went to Chicago. And it was a lot of trauma that she sustained in the head. And so Dora and John had to come stay with Mom. So she helped raise her children as well, her siblings too. I mean, she always had a lot of responsibility. So she was a pretty remarkable woman to be able to do that, to realize that things were not going to get better for her in school. It was very, very difficult, and this was the best thing to do than to lose your hand, to turn around and use that money not for selfish purposes, to buy yourself clothes or let's go on a trip or let's go to this dance, I want to go to a movie. No, she bought it for her mother, a house that we sold. Unfortunately, my sister, who was the executor, sold it a couple of years ago for well over $1 million, that property that my mother paid, like, I don't know, $10,000, $4,000, very, very little. And that's over the years it accrued. She always kept that house. My mom did. Yet she has always been had always taken care of people. So when she was sick, we all her children, we would all take turns going and taking care of her. Those that lived here, we took care of her when she was sick. So that was it. That's what we did. And for people to go do that, and all you have is responsibility. In 20 years, she never bought herself a dress. She always took care of everybody. No one ever invited her anywhere, helped us out when Dad died or anything like that. It was all my mother. She took care of that. So we all took care of her when she needed us. So anyway. And I think this little piece of art that she did at the senior center is not bad. I like it. I just think it's pretty cool. So Mets, she would go to Mets. Though I had to drag her there. Mom, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just sitting here. Well, Mom, let's go to that senior center. She'd hang up on me all the time. Finally, I called her. One time I called her on the good side and she said, okay, I'll go. I said, all right, Mom, I'll go and I'll pick you up. I had a meeting over there and I picked her up after my meeting. I used my lunch hour to do that. And I went in and signed her up and she was real timid. She really didn't want to go. But then she knew everybody there, and so she loved it. She used to love to go to the senior center. But anyway, my mom found a lot of friends there at the senior center. She always spoke very well of the city, that service that she got there. Just, the camaraderie. It's nice to have that, don't you think?
Yeah.
Well, we used to live on East 7th Street, close to HEB, right across from Estrada's Cleaners. That was our property for the longest time. And back then it wasn't as busy. It was a highway. That was 71 going through there. So it was a main road going out of town. And then shortly afterwards, my father bought property on Tillery and had the house moved and then added a room to it, which was a girls' room. So we used to live on East 7th Street, and we kept that property a long time. Until we were running out of funds to take care of Mom. What money we had, a big chunk of it had to go to pay property taxes. So, but we needed that money to take care of Mom. She always worked really hard. She never asked for anything, never got welfare. The only thing, government assistance that she ever received was Social Security, which is everybody puts in money. You're getting a regular paycheck, then Social Security, boy, that's before you get the check, the government's going to take their part. So that's Social Security is what kept us afloat. But the property taxes sunk our family, so we had to dump the property to help pay for the caretakers, and we really couldn't afford to pay the taxes anymore on that property. So. And this is me when I was a little girl. I'm here. This is my oldest sister and then the attorney. So we all had, because we're so many, we grew, when we grew up, there was one person that we were closest to than the other. So I was closer to her. But it's like, oh my God, my shoes are all scuffed up and they're wearing nice pressed dresses, and me, you can tell those little pedal pushers, that's what they were called. Capri pants, they're all baggy, so they're oversized. And of course, I'm not paying attention, I'm just looking out everywhere. And they're looking straight ahead, which is they always thought, who's her dad? She's different, you know? I'm 5'3", and they all thought I was a giant. Oh my God, where did she come from? She must be the milkman's daughter, you know? I guess we used to have milk delivered after my father died. They used to, did you know about that?
Oh,
There would be a truck that would come and deliver milk, so my mom signed up. And oh my God, the milk would come in these glass, big old gallon jars, and that tasted delicious. And for a kid that never had it, we have that. It wouldn't last but a day with all those kids. So there are lots of stories. Right across our house was a slaughterhouse on Chillery. Where Capitol Metro is at, there's a slaughterhouse. So it provided jobs for some of the men that lived there, but it was awful. My mom, you could hear the cows crying at 9, you know, when they were about to be slaughtered. And they'd have to go up a sharp ramp, and they were just forced to go up that ramp, and they would be crying. And then at night, you know, the blood and all of that, you know, slaying down those animals, it would just permeate in the summertime, the whole neighborhood. And that smell and those cries, it really had an effect on my mom. So yes, we had a slaughterhouse in East Austin. Our city fathers thought it was okay to put it there, to give them the permits to allow that to happen. But now Capitol Metro is there, thank God. So now you have the fumes of all of those buses leaving at 5 a.m. or whatever, 6 a.m., whatever time they leave. But it was our neighborhood, and it was a neighborhood that was teeming with kids, teeming. And so I was always felt very comfortable in that neighborhood, even though right next to us there was a family that were truly migrant workers. I mean, they would follow the crops. They would go to Michigan and Wisconsin and Illinois. They would pick vegetables and fruits. So they would leave before school ended. Whatever month it was, they would follow the crops, and they would come back in October, November, and start school. So they never really got an education. But when they came back after working those summers and all of those boys working, I mean, it was a handsome family. They would come in with great big cars. I mean, back then the cars in the 60s were huge. And they would come in 2 or 3 brand new vehicles. That's what they did with their money. But they lived in a 1-room shack. The restroom was outside, connected through the kitchen. There was this wobbly walkway to get to it, and that was it. They'd have to put the water hose through there to take a shower. And they had this small little kitchen, very tiny. And in the other room, there was just this iron bed and a sofa, and the walls were plastered with newspaper magazines. That's what they had. And the boys, the girls, there were 2 girls. The couple would sleep in bed, and the 2 girls, I guess, would sleep in the sofa, but the boys slept in those brand new cars. They did that. I remember seeing them waking up, and you know, they would be considered pachucos, gangsters, but I didn't see them as that way. They were always nice to me. They just clung close to what they had. That was all they had. And eventually the family moved to Chicago, and they stayed there. There's a lot I could say about that family, but one of the good things is that the mom, Doña Maria, taught my mother how to make buñuelos, which I absolutely love. And so she perfected the buñuelos, so every year we would have buñuelos for New Year's. But buñuelos, homemade buñuelos, which is a crispy, real thin tortilla, and you fried it in manteca, and then, you know, you put cinnamon sugar all over it. And my mom would make a special tea for my dad because he had to have his tea, and would pour it on there, which was just really yummy. And so that's what we had. My son, we'd go over there and he'd be popping fireworks because I ended up divorcing. And I wasn't interested in going to clubs and dances for New Year's. I'm just not that kind of person. But everybody would come in from their festivities and we'd sit around and we'd eat the buñuelos. But the lady, Doña Maria, is the one that taught my mother how to make buñuelos. And that family was also significant in that not only that the guys protected us kids and stuff, not that there was much protection, but I mean, we could meander in and out through that, we were okay. But my father died of a heart attack when he was 44. So when he went to the hospital, they dismissed him. They said, "Can you just have indigestion? You're not really sick." And it was on election day in 1964, and they were very listening and tuned to the election. I mean, a presidential election is a big deal. So you had LBJ, and Goldwater was a Republican. And so they sent my daddy home. He was having a heart attack. And he was lying there in bed, and so he had a second one. And so our neighbors helped carry my dad to the car, and my mother, they drove him to the hospital, and where he died that same day that he had been said, "There's nothing wrong with you." But that's how it was. It was a difficult time. If you were Mexican American, if you were African American, if you were poor, I mean, destitute poor, that just you didn't merit anything really, and you had to fight for everything that you got. It just always made us stronger, made us want to escape that kind of life, which is what education was able to provide for us. So my father was involved in the church. So when they built Cristo Rey, it used to be just a small church. It was a wooden church. They decided to build a new one, so my father would help out on the weekends. It's like, "Why don't you stay home and take care of it then?" But no, he went over there. They were very strong Catholics, so he would go and he would help out with that. There were ditches in front of our house, and so anytime there was a rain, it would take a few days before the water could go down. Well, there was an infestation of mosquitoes. And every now and then the city would come and they would spray, but we had lots of mosquitoes. And so one time there was this city employee on a tractor, and he must have hit a pipe because it sent a current of water to our house. I mean, just, it's like a cannonball that wouldn't stop of water. And my mother ran after him, and the guy just took off in a tractor, and I can still see Mom running after him. "Hey, stop, stop, stop." And he just ignored her. And eventually, they came and they were able to stop the water. But I'm surprised that big window didn't break from the force of that water that went on and on and on, and I don't know how long. But my mother, with all of that, just realized just what an injustice and how difficult it was. And she didn't have an opportunity for education, but she learned to advocate when she became a member of Poder. So it's an organization, an environmental organization that fights for the betterment of the community. Like that slaughterhouse eventually, then what happened was a warehouse was built, so you'd have trucks going in and out, and sometimes the gates would be locked, so the trucks would run all night long, whatever time they arrived, and the drivers would just sleep there. Well, you didn't want to sleep in the heat, so they kept those motors running, and the fumes of the gasoline would permeate the neighborhood. So just lots and lots of things like that. So yeah, she became a member of then and would go to city council and boards and commissions and would advocate for different things. So she got some awards for her efforts. My brother ended up working in the governor's office. And I think the one that pretty much is sort of like my mother, an advocate, is me, because I belong to a lot of different groups, and I believe in advocacy and teaching people, well, if you want something done, you have to change it yourself. And so, bring attention to the issue and work to make it happen. So nothing comes, easy. And then to say that, oh, this park is here because, well, the city thought it was good, but no. There's a lot of people fighting to make sure that happens, and some of it takes a decade or longer. And it takes money, so then you have to convince them to put money. How do you do that? Well, they need a bond election. How do you make sure that your project is in the bonds? Well, you have to make sure you work, you advocate, you get people to support it, you get people to agree that this is important, and you get them out. So just a lot of that, but it kind of stems from Mom. Mm-hmm.
So do you have any memories of like family reunions or gatherings?
Usually I have to coordinate them. So it's always a lot of work, One, I end up coordinating them and hosting them because I'm the cook of the family. Like, they do not know how to cook, and you do not want to eat their food. So they're happy to. They'll go. I said, well, just bring a pie. And don't get me a cheap one from HEB. Well, that's the only thing they have over here. Okay, well, get me a good one. Well, what kind? Peach or cherry? They also have apple. It's like, just buy something, That's how it gets. So I ended up just, bring a bag of chips. Can somebody bring ice? So I usually coordinate the family. My mother used to do the cooking, and she would invite her siblings, and they never invited her back. They would just come with appetites, and it seems that I'm doing that, I'm cooking, and so that's it.
Were there any other injustices that you or any family member experienced within Austin or Travis County?
Well, my brother, this one, he had gone to Vietnam, and he worked in construction. And so he was coming home, he had caught the bus, he was hot, he was tired, it was the summertime, and they picked him up, the police picked him up because they thought he was drunk. And he said, well, I was just tired. I was walking that way because I was just tired. And when they had him in jail, he says, all I wanted was some water. Just please give me some water. And they refused to give him water. That. We were asked to write a paper, and so I had no idea what the assignment was, but I wrote it, and so I was kind of slighted because the teacher just announced that that no one would believe who had written the best paper, that somebody had written the very best paper in the class, and that you just would not believe who that person was. And everybody was like, oh, who could it be? Who could it be? I'm sitting there towards the back in the middle, and she just walks down the aisle, and she just slaps the paper right there, and everybody looked at me like, you? Why you? And all I did was slunk down in my chair. I just wanted to be invisible. But, if you did anything, you were not good. You were going to be criticized. And we were so good in Spanish that the teachers were mad at us because the other kids didn't know Spanish and they were struggling. So it was our problem. We were the problem. So lots and lots and lots of things. That's how it was. So, to persevere behind that. The dropout rate was high back then. It was because of so many situations like that. But you just had to keep on going. And I guess maybe that's kind of like why I can be a little bullheaded at times because of that. So, anyhow.
What would you like visitors or new residents to know about Austin or the Travis County?
It's too big. They should go away. It's here. It's too big. I don't recognize my town. I don't. I go to East Dawson. What the hell? What's this? Oh my God, are you kidding me? They put that there? Oh my gosh, no. No. And it's not just East Dawson, it's just all over town. You know, there were lots of things about Austin when it was smaller that I didn't like. And there are lots of things now that I do like. I mean, I like the variety of restaurants. I enjoy it. I am so pleased that attention is being paid to this cemetery. But that's the whole world. The population has just grown and grown, and what are you going to do? People have to go somewhere.
Which of your ancestors are buried here in Oakwood Cemetery?
My grandfather, whom I never met, who died when Mom was 5. He's buried here at the very, very back when they would put all the minorities. Yeah, that's where he's at. Mm-hmm.
His name is Ignacio, right?
Ignacio Moreno. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the first time that you visited Oakwood Cemetery? If so, what was that like?
I would bring Mom. I would pick her up, and she had dementia, which later turned into Alzheimer's. So, I'd take her for a ride as opposed to just having her at home. I'd take her for a ride. Do you want to go see your father? Oh, yes, yes. So we had many visits here to Oakwood to see her father. So that's how I became familiar with it. Sometimes we drive over here and I'd see the chapel and I'd see some of the beautiful markers, and I would recognize names of family. That was our introduction to Oakwood through my mom.
If you could send a message to your ancestors, what might it be?
I would just want to thank them for everything that they did, and for my Tio Roy and Tia Roya for not really understanding when I was young, and that how special they are and how much I hold them in esteem for what they did to make my life possible. I've already told my mom. She knows that. And I begged her forgiveness for being a lousy kid, being very rebellious. But yes, I would just want to thank them, and that for all the hardships that they endured, and that I'm so sorry. And because of them, we're fine. Thank you. That's what I would tell them. And I think about them often.
So my last question for now is, What do you hope for in the future?
Oh my gosh, that we find solutions to climate change. That really wasn't something in my horizon. I mean, I would think of social justice issues or economic development or education. Not economic development, let's do another building or bring in, some more businesses over here, but just to help people. There's so many challenges these days, so many different things that, but we all just need to, pitch in and try to help, even if it's just our little part, our little neighborhood. Everybody needs some help. That's how we're going to get better. And so right now we need to solve this climate crisis. It's awful. It really is. For so many people that have to work outside. There are hard jobs out there. I couldn't do it, and I'm grateful that there are people that can, that do.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. I actually have just one more question.
Okay.
I see that you have a photo here with Cesar Chavez. If you don't mind, there's like a story behind that photo?
It was not a very good story, I just, Cesar Chavez, here I am with these awful glasses. It's like, why didn't I take them off, It was during the Great Boycott, and he was here doing some fundraising and trying to build support. And so there was an event, social, and so I went to it. Jose Uriegas had opened up this really nice Mexican restaurant there, so it was on La Vaca, and like 5th Street, so we went there and he was there. And he was off to the side, everybody was socializing, and I went up to him and I said, may I have a picture with you? He said, yeah. He was so humble, just like, here's this is a big deal, and he was just there quiet, and his whole persona was just one of humility. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.